Okay, so I'd like to make an introduction of some very important people who we're very lucky to have with us today. You may know, if you're in 7th and 8th grade, you're very well aware of the Bluegrass grant that the school received with the Hudson Valley Bluegrass Association, and we've been doing some special programs around bluegrass music. If you're in 5th and 6th grade, this is all news to you. So this special performance we have today is, we're very honored to have Jeff I'm going to mispronounce it, Anzevino. And who is an area bluegrass musician. He lives in the area. He's also one of the founders of the Hudson Valley Bluegrass Association. And he's a Dobro player. And we're very excited to hear him play and talk to us a bit about the history of bluegrass music and the Dobro in particular. On the 20th of November, we are very honored to have a world-famous bluegrass band, Special Consensus, who's going to be playing here at the school for us in the school and also doing an evening performance for people in the Hudson Valley. And we're very excited that they're going to be coming here, and you guys will get a chance to hear from them. They're touring in Europe right now, and then they're going to be here before they kick off a U.S. tour. So we're very honored to have that happening. But so I will stop talking so you can hear some music and hear from Jeff and Aaron about the history of bluegrass. In addition to these folks, we also have Mike Foley, who you may not know, but I hope that you do. Mike Foley is a former PDS English teacher who's also a bluegrass musician and also a very involved person in this project. And Lynn Lipton, who is also involved in this project and a bass player. And so, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for coming out to hear a little bit about the Dobro and bluegrass music. I'm just going to play a quick song, and then I'll tell you a little bit about this instrument because it's a little bit unusual. It's an old traditional song about an Indian maid who is longing for her brave, her man who is off to war. And it was adopted then during the mid part of the 20th century by, I think Woody Guthrie really did it, in a song called Union Maid, which was a union organizing song. So it's interesting how songs, traditional songs, can kind of evolve through time. And speaking of evolving through time, it's interesting how mascot names have evolved through time. Any baseball fans here? We love baseball. Of all the baseball teams in the Major League, only 2 of them don't end in S, like you have Yankees and Mets. Only 2. Dodgers ends in S. What doesn't end in S? Sox.
Red Sox.
Sox. And even basketball, there are very few, but the modern teams are taking things like the Heat, the Flame, and
the Eclipse.
So that's kind of a very modern name. So just keep that in mind. Modern? I'm not plugging anything. Except the Queen's Galley. The Queen's Galley is a great organization. I live around town. I live right around the corner from that in Kingston. They do great things. So bluegrass music and the Dobro. The Dobro is the red-headed stepchild of bluegrass music. Even Bill Monroe, the founder of bluegrass music, to his dying day, refused to acknowledge that the Dobro had any role in bluegrass music, and many of the other stalwarts, the real traditional players like Ralph Stanley, still reject the Dobro as having a role in the music. However, many very good, the ones that really put it in bluegrass, Earl Scruggs, who played with Josh Graves. You know, there's a big fight way back when, I think sometime in the 50s, when Earl Scruggs and Bill Monroe went separate ways. And Earl Scruggs took the Dobro and Josh Graves into his band. And Josh Graves influenced a lot of other Dobro players down through the years, Jerry Douglas among others. So Dobro does have a role now, but it's not one of the original instruments in Dobro, in bluegrass music. It's a uniquely American instrument. It was invented rather recently in 1908, so fiddles have been around for hundreds of years. Banjos, which were really evolved from an African instrument of a gourd with gut strings and a skin head, That's a very old instrument, but the dobro is really very new. And it's different than a guitar. Well, let's say a dobro is a guitar. It's a type of guitar, and all dobros are guitars, generally speaking, but not all guitars are dobros. Now, can anybody tell me what's different? I don't have a guitar to show you, but what's the main thing? Right there.
You play it kind of like, it's like you play a guitar, kind of like tilted and like, yeah, and then you kind of flat laying on this flat, yeah.
That is a difference. It's a big difference.
You have a big metal head.
Yeah, this hubcap, we would call it a hubcap. It's not really a hubcap.
Well, it's sort of like, it has like different kinds of, instead of having that big open space, it has another big.
There's something underneath that hubcap, and I'll take one apart and show you.
It has speakers.
It has speakers. It has little sound holes here. Instead of, the guitar has a sound hole, one hole, but this has a resonator underneath, and it has these speakers.
You play with like 3 fingers, like the one that you're doing with 2 fingers?
That's right. I play with finger picks, and it's very much like a banjo style of playing.
The neck is enormous.
The neck is enormous. It's almost a 2x4 neck. And there are 2 types of dobros, and maybe this is a time to talk about. There's the square neck and the round neck. This is a square neck, and it's played lap style like this. It's common in a lot of Hawaiian music, especially in the early part of the 20th century, in the 1920s when it was first invented. Then there's something called the round neck, which has a guitar neck, and this neck also has huge. Look at the action on those strings. You can put your thumb under the strings, and you can't really do that on a standard guitar. So when you play lap style, you touch the string with the bar. Where a guitar, you press the string to the fret. And there's a certain math and physics involved in this that I can't tell you all the details, but it has to do with the distance between the saddle and the nut here. And when you press, there's a mathematical relationship between the distance that makes a pitch, and that's how all the different notes are formed.
Well, it's sort of like, it makes like a little bit more like a dramatic sound, like the guitar is a little bit more.
Yeah, and that's what attracted me to this instrument in the first place. It very much can replicate the human voice. And it's good for backing up a singer, and you can do things like the yodel lick. And I love the slide.
When you do the slide, it sounds like something from like Hawaiian music.
Yeah, it's used in a lot of Hawaiian music. Let me play a little thing I don't think it's really Hawaiian, but it's something that Americans played to sort of pay tribute to Hawaiian music. So yes, it's used in a lot of Hawaiian music. This, we call it nowadays tifkad, Tifkad, the instrument formerly known as the dobro. The dobro was invented by 5 Czechoslovakian brothers who came to the United States in the early part of the 20th century. They were fiddle makers, and they wanted an instrument that was a little bit louder than guitars, because this is really the time before there were amplifiers and microphones, and they needed something that was a little bit louder to cut over the noise of other instruments. So they invented this, and the name dobro is kind of a combination of their names were Dopiera, and they were the Dopiera brothers, so D-O-B-R-O, and that's where we get the dobro. And that was a trademark name, almost like Coke or Kleenex. Every tissue, you've got tissues and then you've got Kleenex. And then you've got sodas and you've got Cokes. Now inside the dobro is a metal cone. And we're going to just kind of see how inside there, it looks like when you take apart your stereo speaker, if you've ever looked in your stereo speaker, there's a fabric cone. So this has a cone that is supported on a cover plate or on a sound well. And then this saddle is what holds the strings. So on a guitar, the whole top of the instrument vibrates to make the sound. This sound comes from this speaker. So it's kind of a mechanical thing. So there's the Tifcad. So it's really, it's not really proper to call it a Dobro. We like to call it, we Dobro players like to call them resophonic guitars or resonator guitars because of this device that's called a resonator inside the guitar. So back to the action. Then there's the Spanish style guitar, and Waylon Jennings' band has it. Dire Straits has an album with an instrument that looks like this, but it's metal bodied. Probably a national guitar, and that has a round neck. And those you do press with your fingers, or you can play it with a slide on your pinky. So that's another way of playing the resonator guitar. So there are two types. Keep that in mind: round neck and square neck. One is played Spanish style, and the other is played lap style. In bluegrass, they're all played lap style, and they're played all 99% of the time tuned in the key of G.
Can you explain that a little further? You mean the strings are individually tuned to the
Yes,
chord?
yeah, this tuning, and I've got, this is tuned in a different tuning, so I'll show you the two tunings. This is tuned in G, open G, actually. So the strings are DBG, DBG from the smaller to the, from the smaller strings to the larger. So it makes a G chord when you strum it. You get a C chord, and then you get a D chord at the 5th and 7th fret. So that's the 1, 4, and 5 chords. Is anybody familiar with that kind of numbering system? It's an easy way to communicate the chords. You can get an A, C, D, and this is another C up here. So that's the open G tuning. You know, as the founder of the Hudson Valley Bluegrass Association, the danger of being so closely associated with someone says, oh yeah, Jeff plays bluegrass. And I love bluegrass, but I also love the way bluegrass relates to other music. So I like to play other types of music. I like Western swing and I like blues. So I found another tuning that's an open D tuning. And you can hear the difference. G and D. And this is better for blues, and this is a D, A, F sharp, D, A, D, and that D is a real low D, and it's very growly. Practicing that one. Anyway, let's see. I can play with it. This is actually a blues song that evolved into a bluegrass song, and it's called "Sitting on Top of the World." I'm a very good organizer, but I'm not the greatest musician. I only started playing this when I was 30 years old, and which goes to show it's never too late. But the thing is, you got to practice a lot, and I've got a lot of different interests, and you really have to put, they say, 10,000 hours into an instrument before you get good. You know what? You guys are lucky because you guys got hundreds of thousands of hours in front of you. You get to be my age, and you don't, young man.
How old are you now?
Am I allowed to answer that? I'm 55. 55. So let's see, some of the other things. You wanted to hear about organizing. You know, community organizing, organizing your friends into a baseball team, organizing a chess club, a language club. They're all great things because it brings people together, and a lot of great things can get accomplished. When I had a friend that played banjo, and he's moving away to take a job, and I had just moved to New York in 1991 from Florida, and I had only been playing at that time about 6 years, And so my friend Jim and I got together and played banjo. I knew he was leaving, so I knew I would be missing a musical partner. So I had met some other musicians, and I knew that there was a great radio station in Poughkeepsie called WHVW, an AM radio station that's very eclectic, 95 AM if you tune it in. It plays a lot of old-time country and bluegrass music. So I made a flyer back in the days before I had any kind of internet and all that. Made a flyer and got this little band together that I knew, and I got them to play a concert at the Rhinecliff Hotel, and I took out an $80 ad on the radio for some commercials. And you know, who likes bluegrass music? We're going to have a bluegrass concert. We want to get everybody together that likes bluegrass music. And maybe 100 people came, and we signed them all up on a mailing list. And so we sent them, and I did some desktop publishing, and I sent everybody a little one-page newsletter. They all told their friends. We started having regular meetings, and it just evolved into something really wonderful. And the best thing about it is that people say, well, what are your responsibilities as president, and what do you do? Fortunately, for me, I don't do that much anymore. There are a lot of really great people. In order to make something happen, you have to delegate. You can kind of organize and inspire, but then you've got to find people that have the time and the talent to do things. Like Lynn takes care of our website, and Fred comes over and videotapes for us. We have a board of directors that take minutes for the meetings. People do our accounting for us and manage our money. We have someone who's an attorney, and he can handle some of our legal things. So and they all play music, they all love bluegrass music, they get something out of the organization, but they all give back something that's all relative to what their talents are and what their times are. Let's see. I don't know, one other thing that I'd like to talk about a little bit is because, you know, a little secret about me, they call me Geography Jeff. I've always liked geography. When I was a kindergartner, my aunt gave me a map of the United States, a puzzle map, and it had all the capitals and the products, and I memorized all those. So all the 8th graders would just say Idaho, and I'd say Boise, and they say North Dakota, and I say Bismarck. And I knew all these, you know, all these little inane facts. But geography is a lot more than facts. It's really about relationships. And relationships that evolve, can anybody kind of figure out or make a guess about what these relationships might involve in geography? Like maybe place and time, and people, and maybe language, religion, economy. You could take it to anywhere, even music. So I wrote a paper when I was in college about the diffusion of country music in America. How did it start? Where did it start? Like bluegrass. Anybody know where bluegrass started? What region of the country? Where's that? Yeah, really good, really good. To Kentucky and Tennessee. In fact, bluegrass music, does anybody know why they call it bluegrass music? Speaking of mascots and nicknames? Yep, you. Yep, right in front of you.
Because it was started in Bluegrass, Kentucky.
Bluegrass state of Kentucky, yeah. Bill Monroe had a band called the Bluegrass Boys, and some writer, he didn't call it blue. He didn't say, I'm going to invent bluegrass music. And he didn't start playing music and say, gee, I think I'll call this bluegrass music. Some creative writer, journalist back then, just called it bluegrass music, and it stuck. So geography of what I really like about music, I think you could study it from a sociological standpoint. You could look at the lyrics of bluegrass music and maybe band names, and you could look at song titles and see how this music that really developed in the 1930s, 1940s, and I think it was actually named in the 1950s. Those are the golden years, the late 40s. How that reflected United States history and geography. What kind of things were going on in the 1930s in America? What was the big seminal event?
World War II.
That was a little bit later, but that's good. That we can. The economy kind of went down the tubes, right? The Great Depression, so the economy went down the tubes. Rural areas were especially hard hit. There were also things going on in the West. The Dust Bowl in the Depression, it hit farmers hard. So a lot of people moved from rural areas to bigger cities, and because the time before World War II, there was a gear up for the war effort. There was a lot of factories going on, a lot of manufacturing. So a lot of people that lived on farms were moving away from their homes in the mountains in very isolated parts of Appalachia, Kentucky, Tennessee, Virginia, and the Carolinas, and they were moving to places like Detroit and Chicago and Baltimore for jobs. So you'll see a lot of songs about missing the old home place, the cabin on the hill, you know, of mother and dad at home pining for days going by. If I had more time, I'd kind of pass out some books. But one thing, anybody wants to kind of carry this further, do an internet search or look through some song books about song lyrics and titles, and see how that can reflect that part of our country's history and geography. So we're going to give you a little bonus here today. We're going to play some harmonica too. The reason I like geography is, the reason I like bluegrass music and old-timey music is because when I was a little kid, I watched a lot of cartoons. You know, back then, TV was kind of new and we thought TV was a thing to do. Now we know better. But, okay. Well, there were a lot of cartoons, and when I was a kid, a lot of the cartoons didn't have a lot of dialogue. There wasn't a lot of talking, and there was a lot of music accompanying the cartoons. And a lot of the music was based on old-time fiddle tunes and things that made it into the bluegrass repertoire. So these, when I first started hearing bluegrass and old-time music, I said, oh yeah, I remember those. That was all the soundtracks from all my favorite cartoons. So I'm going to play something like that. Thank you. Anybody recognize any of those songs? Maybe the first one especially, huh?
Sounds like the sailor's hornpipe that they do in Scottish dancing.
Oh, that's exactly what it is. And what cartoon might that have been from? Who was the famous sailor man? Oh, just shout it out. So, yeah, that's right. And, you know, wow, that guy's
So if somebody, you know, in 5th or 6th or 7th or 8th grade were interested in starting to learn how to play the resophonic guitar, the Dobro, what would you suggest? What would be a good way to sort of begin learning about?
That's a great question, and I'm going to tie that into how people have learned to play over time, because learning to play the resophonic guitar isn't really much different than learning to play other musical instruments. Nowadays, due to technology, the wonders of technology, we have all kinds of DVDs available, instructional DVDs. They're all over the internet. Now, even DVDs are old hat. Now you go online and you can download lessons onto your computer, so you don't even need that piece of plastic anymore. That's the newest way. Of course, taking lessons from someone is a great idea, because I think that's really the best way. You have to listen to a lot of music. And I always, my first musical experiences come from whistling. So when my father taught me how to whistle when I was a little boy, I've always stuck with that, and I've always had that tune running through my head. So having, humming, whistling is always a good thing. And back in the olden days, you know, when bluegrass was evolving in the late 30s and 40s, before there was really television, when radio was brand new, people lived in very isolated hollows in rural areas. They had the radio. So they only on Saturday night there would be a show like the Grand Ole Opry or something from WLS in Chicago. They had very powerful radio stations back then. Everybody would gather around the radio and they'd listen to this music. So once a week they could hear it. Nowadays, think of how easy it is. You can put your Walkman, well, no Walkman, I don't even think they have those anymore, right? Your iPhone, iPods, okay. My iPhone has that iPod. So you can put it on anytime you want and listen to whatever music you want. So the choices that we have today are incredible. And think about what things were like, you know, 50, 60, 70 years ago. That we didn't have the choices back then. So people would sit around porches, play music. They would learn it from their fathers or their uncles. But nowadays, it's really easy to learn from many other types of sources.
And we've heard too that the festivals such as like the Gray Fox Festival, that there are professionals who give workshops and people are playing all the time. So
yeah,
that
festivals.
might be a good exposure, first exposure. I'm hoping we can get some of our students to Great Fox this next
Yeah,
summer.
festivals are a great idea. They're a lot of fun. You can listen to the music on the stage. You can go to the workshops. And the musicians are really accessible, you know, not like rock stars or movie stars. They like to meet their fans. You buy their CD, they sign autographs. They'll shake your hand, they'll talk to you. So it's really a very approachable group of people.
Okay. Well, we want to thank Jeff. Let's give him a round of applause for coming out. Thank you so much.